Good morning and welcome to today's administrative meeting of the Public Service Commission. Before we get started today, I would like to introduce that we have a new employee. Kimberly Sheehan is dead center there. Kimberly is one of our new Assistant General Counsels. She came to us from the Maryland Transportation Authority, where she was an Assistant Attorney General for the past 12 years. She's done a lot of arbitration work, administrative work, and appellate work. So we will be putting her to good use as she joins our General Counsel's office. She has an education from St. Mary's College, so she's a Seahawk, and she has a master's from Boston University, and she received her JD from George Washington University Law School down the road. So Kimberly, welcome to the Commission. We look forward to working with you. Looking back, we have minutes from the administrative meeting on November the 28th. Commissioner O'Donnell, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve and accept as submitted the minutes from November 28th, 2018 admin meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the consent agenda, we have 5 items. The first item is Premier Power Solutions, LLC, filed on July 2, 2018, notice of change in ownership. On item number 2 is Premier Power Solutions, LLC, filed on July 2, 2018, notice of change in ownership. 3 is BCM1, Inc., filed on September 14, 2018, notification of stock purchase. Item 4 is Customer Acquisition Specialists of America, Inc., DBA North American Energy Advisors, filed on November 2nd, 2018, request to cancel its electricity and gas supplier licenses. And item 5 is Darren Brown, filed on November 5th, 2018, an application for certification as a geothermal heating and cooling renewable energy facility residential system.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions on these 5 consent items? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For items number 1 and 2, I move that we note the changes in ownership structure. For item number 3, I move that we note the transaction. For item number 4, I move that we approve the cancellation request. And for item number 5, I move that we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility certification number with the energy savings estimate. Direct the applicant to establish a REC account with PJM GATS within 30 days of certification, and file a geothermal and thermal biomass generation report with the Commission within 1 week of each recording of generation data with GATS of RECs created, and direct the applicant to file notice with the Commission within 30 days of any change to the information in the application.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The 5 motions are approved.
Moving on to the administrative agenda, item number 6 is Sable Power and Gas, LLC, filed on August 24th, 2018, an application for a license to supply electricity or electric generation services in Maryland.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. This item addresses a request by Sable for authorization to operate as an electricity broker in Maryland. They have significant experience in the energy industry. Staff contacted the states in which Sable is already operating and determined that they do have a satisfactory record. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission authorize Sable to operate as an electricity broker with the conditions recommended by staff in its comments.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. Do commissioners have questions? Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we grant the company a license to operate as an electricity supplier in Maryland, limited to broker services for the customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff, and direct the company to file notice with the Commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in the application.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Item number 7 is Clean Choice Energy Community, LLC, Calvert Energy, LLC, NextAmp, Inc., Summit Ridge Energy, LLC, and Earth, Air Technologies, LLC, filed on October 15, 2018, request for a waiver of account limitations.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. Clean Choice Energy Community, LLC, NextAmp, Inc., Summit Ridge Energy, and Earth and Air Technologies. Collectively, the applicants seek a waiver of the 350 subscriber cap for community solar energy energy generating systems as prescribed by COMAR 20 620203A. Or in the alternative, request that the Commission modify the cap individually for each of the 12 community solar systems in a manner that allows the applicants' systems to support 100% residential participation based on an average subscription size of 4.5 kilowatts. Applicants have authority to operate as subscriber organizations in Maryland and have retained reserved capacity in the community solar energy generating system queues of Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, Potomac Electric Power Company, Delmarva Power and Light Company, and the Potomac Edison Company. The applicants for the instant waiver will control community solar systems that occupy the 3 categories in the pilot, specifically open, low to moderate income, and small brownfield other. Together, applicants' 12 projects comprise 22,157 kilowatts of the total Year 1 community solar capacity. Under COMAR 20 620203, a subscriber organization may subscribe up to 350 accounts per system unless the electric company in whose service territory the system is located has developed an automated billing function, in which case a subscriber organization may subscribe as many accounts as needed to match the system's capacity. The regulations do not require that the electric companies develop an automated system. Applicants are essentially asking that the Commission render the regulations meaningless by requiring the electric companies to accept as many enrollees as they may require, whether or not there is an automated billing function in place. The Commission has previously granted a waiver of the 350 subscriber cap. However, in that case, a single company with control of 6 systems was involved, and the affected utilities were BGE, PEPCO, and DPL. They had indicated that they could actually handle these 6 systems. Staff has contacted BGE, PEPCO, DPL, and Potomac Edison regarding the ability of each to handle applicants' request. None of these electric companies has developed an automated billing function for the pilot. PE has indicated that it does not intend to develop such a system. BGE, PEPCO, and DPL indicated that they are in the process of developing such a system, but it won't be available until the end of the second quarter 2019. That could be when these projects go online, but we don't really know. The PHI companies indicated that they could accommodate approximately 100 more customers per CGIS. BGE did not make such a representation. Staff recommends the Commission deny applicants' request for a waiver unless and until the electric company in whose territory is CGIS needing such additional enrollment is located, has developed an automated billing function for the pilot as provided by regulation, and therefore we recommend that you deny the requested waiver.
Thank you, Ms. Garofalo. Counsel for the applicant.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Todd Chasen here on behalf of all of the applicants for this agenda item. We come to you this morning with what I think is actually a good problem. What we're finding is that there's a great deal of interest in these programs, and the customers are appropriately sizing their subscriptions. Not too large, not too small. But in many instances, what this means is the same size pie ends up with more pieces to go around. And so as these projects are moving forward and as they're selling these subscriptions, what they're finding is they will not be able to fully subscribe them based on the 350 cap. That was not something that was necessarily predictable at the outset. I think the expectation was that folks were going to size closer to 100% of their usage, where many of them are now sizing closer to 70 or 75%. These applicants that we have today are spanning all of the different categories and across multiple of the utility territories. What we have is a very good cross-section, and what you're finding is all of these companies, along with others who are behind us, who are not able to do this on a 350 basis. The standard under the regulations is for good cause shown. That's the basis for a waiver. The Commission has previously looked at this issue in the Forefront case a few months ago, as Staff Counsel mentioned, and the conclusion was that good cause was shown. There's been no argument from staff or from anyone else that we've not shown good cause under the identical facts that were presented before. The only difference here is that the utilities haven't agreed to it. I don't think that simply having been first in line as Forefront was, or having fewer projects, though still several projects, is a basis for distinction. There's no rule under the regulations that says for good cause shown where it's convenient. What we're really talking about is the need for a 21st century billing system for a 21st century technology. And the notion that we're ever going to be able, even at a 350 level, to have these projects being subscribed using manual billing is obviously incorrect, and we know that because the Exelon utilities have all said we're going to automate. And here we find ourselves 2.5 years after the regulations were put in place, and there's still no commitment to doing that. There's a commitment to loading up more on the manual side of things and to try to do a few more, but not nearly the numbers that are required. The idea with this cap in the first place was that if the projects were moving along at the pace that was expected, if there was some question about whether this program was going to be going forward, we didn't want the utilities incurring this cost necessarily unnecessarily. What we now have are dozens of projects across the state from years 1 and now 2 and 3 will be coming shortly that are going to be online for the next 20 years. There cannot be any serious argument that these are going to be able to be manually billed for the next 20 years. I see no basis for distinction from the prior case, and I think that the Commission needs to grant this waiver the same way that it did for Forefront. I have company representatives here with me today if we get into the details of the subscriptions and the issues that they're seeing out there, but I don't think that they necessarily need to come up now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chason. Are there any representatives of the affected 4 IOUs that wish to make any comments? Counsel for Baltimore Gas.
Good morning, Commissioners. Beverly Sakura on behalf of Baltimore Gas and Electric. Mr. Herson from BG was here a few weeks ago, and his comments still stand. We are definitely working on automating the billing system. And we do share the concerns of Mr. Chason, though, that we're okay with the first few that went over, but now we've got more than we probably can handle. So we're in a difficult position. But we didn't start on the billing system because this was a pilot with a limit of 350, and so when we realized that the pilot was going to be more successful, we made efforts to start automating the system. We, as Ms. Garofalo said, are expecting the system to be ready by the end of the second quarter, and that will solve a lot of the problems, but until then it will be a challenge, but we are working on automating.
Can you explain what is involved with respect to manual billing?
No idea.
Okay.
I don't know if Mr. Frayne or Ms. Fiery.
I know you weren't expecting possibly to speak on this, so I appreciate that.
John Frayne for BGE. The manual billing is just that. The issue is that there's so much data that's coming through that needs to be processed on an hourly basis, that you really need complicated programs. You can't just use like an Excel type of spreadsheet. You're looking at complicated computer programs that need to be manually programmed and looked at on a daily basis to keep them running versus an automated billing system that can take the information and do it itself. That's at a high level how that works. If you have more specific questions, I might or might not be able to answer them.
I suspect there's an incremental cost for every additional customer over 350. Is there any ability to ballpark that cost?
I can't really say here this morning. There may be an incremental cost in terms of manually billing every incremental customer over 350. Is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah, I would expect there would be some type of incremental cost, although I'll say that, the folks that we have working on this are obviously salaried employees, and so, it's a matter of them, having the capacity to be able to do it more than necessarily an incremental cost for additional resources.
Thank you. Ms. Garofalo mentioned a moment ago that, Ms. Garofalo, did you say it was PHI or Delmarva said they could accommodate an additional 100?
Both companies,
Both
the PHI
companies.
companies said they could. But Potomac Edison has nothing in the works, and they are not required under the regulation to have such a system being built.
Does Baltimore Gas have a position? I think staff said that BG&E did not have a position when they spoke to staff.
Oh, just with regard to the 100 customers.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think we could say we could handle another 100. And that's all going to be dependent, too, on which of these systems come online before our billing system comes up. We've seen delays in some of the other projects because of various issues in the county. So if they get delayed past the point that our billing system gets up and running, it's not going to be a problem. If they all come, everything comes together perfectly and they're all ready to go on May 1st and our system's not ready yet, then that's going to be a problem. So it's really kind of hard to say.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Quick question.
Commissioners. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Frang, Mr. Chasen argues that there's no distinction between the first waiver that we granted and this one, I think is what I heard him say. Isn't it possible that just the sheer scope and scale of this submittal distinguishes it significantly from the first one, because that one was very limited in scope and scale? This is much larger. It's 22 megawatts of customers.
Absolutely. The scale of this makes it a lot more complicated for us in terms of manually billing.
So as these projects proceed towards coming online and your billing system proceeds towards coming online, if we were to disapprove this now, we could always have time to come back in and look at the waiver again, couldn't we?
Yes, absolutely. As soon as the billing system was online, we would have, I don't believe, any issue with a waiver above the cap.
So, Mr. Chasen, can I ask you if you have a timeliness concern with regard to this submittal, or could we wait till later so we have a clearer picture of which is going to come online when?
Yeah, I understand the question, and I think Ms. Sikora makes a good point. There are 2 points in time that are important. One is when we're actually out there selling them. We're out there selling them now, and so we need to know now what we'll be able to ultimately turn on when the systems begin running. And so we need an answer now. But we don't necessarily need, and for some of these projects, they are spread out over time. I know the earliest of the projects expect a COD sometime in March, so they are fairly close.
Are you at the 350 limit now on these sales?
They're heading in that direction, but the issue is one of sizing, right? If the message comes back, nope, you're stuck with the 350, we're going to have to change the strategy for selling them.
Right. I'm asking you to help me to decide which is the appropriate balance of interests.
Right.
All of the customers of the utilities or these projects, we want these projects to be successful. Obviously, it's why we created this pilot program. We're investing a lot of money in it, but we have to balance a lot of interests. So I'm asking you to help me make a measured decision. Not just, I know you want it because you've submitted this on behalf of your consumers, but I'm really trying to get to the nub of this. Do we have some time to wait to get a clear picture of how these things are actually coming together?
I don't think...
And I would expect you will, I know you will, give me a very objective answer.
To be completely candid, there are different times when they're going to be coming online. And I think that if the commission wants to flesh that out more, because I think that if we've got a Q2 completion for these IT programs, I think some of, and I can't tell you which ones because I don't have COD on all of them, I know sort of the range, but not each individually, they will be fine. and that by granting it now, you'll be allowing us to go out and sell them, but it won't be an issue for the utilities until they actually come online. I think that there's a limited number of these projects that will come before that they would need to deal with, but we would need to flesh those details out. Is that helpful? I'm not trying to evade your question. I want to make sure I'm helping.
Well, I understand your position. I appreciate your answer. This is still an unsettled question in my mind, so I'm truly trying to arrive at what's the best decision. Thank you.
Do other commissioners have questions? Commissioner Herman.
So, Ms. Socorro, when you say that you can't accommodate, you can't say that you could accommodate an additional 100, what does that mean? Does that mean under your existing budget, that you don't have the personnel? I'm trying to understand what that means.
It means, again, going back to know what other projects that are above the 350 limit that have already been granted a waiver, how many of those will be in. It is a resource limitation. We're going to need people to actually be doing the billing. What that entails, I don't know exactly, but, it will require people. And, these are not people that we can even get quickly or easily. So, depending on the timing, if an extra 100 of this company is, online and there, that might not be a problem if some of the other projects that have already been, the waiver's been approved, aren't, they don't come online. I'm not familiar enough to know exactly how many have been approved above the 350 already, but, I think it is dependent on kind of the combination of what happens before the system comes online.
So what would happen, hypothetically, if the commission granted the waiver and some of these projects came online before your system was up and running? Would people not get billed? What would happen if
I
this...
suspect that would be the case, that people would not get their bills on time.
Uh-huh. So, this is part of the concern. And Ms. Garofalo, I don't know, I wasn't involved in the development of these regs. Were you involved in the development of these regs? Or
Yes.
maybe Mr. Vanderhayden?
Mr. Vanderhayden and I were, but it was a compromise. This portion of the regulation was a compromise.
That's what I wanted to ask about.
Yeah,
So were developers involved in the compromise, Mr. Vanderhayden? Were there representatives?
Yes, Your Honor. There were folks from all aspects of the stakeholder communities involved in setting these regs up.
And is it was it, as part of the discussion, is it a cost issue, do you recall? Was it a cost issue, a resource issue in the development of these regs and this limitation?
My understanding is that most of the concerns about putting an upper limit had to do with the manual processing. My understanding is the cost involves transferring the data from the subscriber list that comes across each month, unless it's updated less frequently. That comes across typically as a Excel spreadsheet. The utility will have to extract the data from that. I think if they're doing it manually, it means a person sitting there making that calculation or computations and transferring the data into their billing system or something that can interact with their billing system. So it's a manual cost. I think we have suggested that folks who need to do more than 350 would get in touch with the utility and ask them what it would cost to, say, add an additional 100 accounts per month, if they'd be willing to develop a price to handle that, so that it's not a blanket increase in the capability, in which case the utilities would all have to prepare to provide 450 or more. But if it's the additional 100 accounts that may come across, that's the cost. I think they are prepared to be ready to handle 350, and those costs of doing that manual transfers, what was anticipated and perhaps calculated into budgets. And so asking for more than that now, and perhaps asking for every project to come across with the additional 100, I think is the concern.
Thank you. Ms. Socorro, when the company filed its pilot, did it file a budget?
I don't believe so.
Was there a utility cost associated with the pilot?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I will say that just, again, it is a matter of cost, but it is a matter of resources, depending on when these projects come online that are above. when we were looking at this, we were expecting 350. That's kind of how we planned our resources. It would really be getting the additional resources, and depending on how quickly some of these came on, again, it's a matter of hiring people, it's a matter of training them. Utility building is not the easiest thing for folks to always understand, even when they've been doing it a long time. So it's not just, if we get more money, it'll solve the problem. I mean,
Right.
longer term it could, but by then we'll have the system automated.
Is it possible for BGE to accelerate the development of the system, and therefore, potentially spend some more, spend an incremental amount more and accelerate the development of the system?
I'd have to ask, but I doubt that's likely at this point.
Okay. And you expect that when you say the end of the second quarter, that means testing and everything else?
Yes.
That's the whole
Yes.
system. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm just asking staff, just going back to the rulemaking, looking at the law itself, did the legislature ever specifically state that there could only be 350 applicants for each of these projects?
The law doesn't state that, but the purpose of the regulations was to implement the law. And I think we agree, Mr. Vanderheyden can give you more detail on this, but I think we looked at this as a compromise position between the utilities and future CGISs and people who might be developers. Those were the people involved in the regulation writing, in addition to various governmental agencies.
Right. And in the discussion, there is in the law a requirement that a certain number of residential and low to moderate income, the legislature was quite clear on that they wanted to make sure that there'd be enough participants from different categories in the program. Is that correct?
Yes, although I'd have to look at the statute. I don't think there's a specific number in there, but I'd have to look.
But they do specifically, so they don't say anything about limiting the number of subscribers, but they do say that they want a successful program will have adequate numbers of different types of
There's
participants in the program.
wording to that effect, yes.
Okay, and in the rulemaking, the commission really didn't get into detailed discussion in this area of how many customers it would take necessarily, and what each customer was going to use at that time. What I'm saying is there was really no detailed discussion at that point. It was just sort of a number that was thrown out. There was a compromise.
I'd have to look at the transcript. Of course, the commission never issues an order when it issues regulations. It just issues the
Given this
regulations.
is a pilot, we are learning as we go here. So, I mean, this is factual new information that we're looking at, that as subscribers are now being, subscribed or solicited, and we're looking at the projects, we are looking at new information. And to make these projects successful, to make this program successful, we may have to make some alterations, or some of these projects will not be economic. Is that correct?
Yes, I think staff feels that if you grant this waiver, you are basically eliminating that regulation, and so I don't know if you want to do that.
Well, we do have the authority to grant the waiver.
You have authority to grant the
Okay.
waiver, yes.
All right. All right, and to grant a waiver to ensure that we're meeting the intent of the legislature is probably a good rationale to do that. Would you agree?
Well, yes.
Okay. Can I just ask quickly, the company, Ms. Sikora, during the regulations, did you ever bring up any of these issues as far as, well, actually, going back to when the legislature was considering the law, did you engage in that at all? The company participate and warn the legislature about these resource issues and your inflexibility and trying to actually make this thing work?
With the legislature, but I'm fairly confident that during the rulemaking process, this was, because again, this was meant to be a pilot. And, when you're doing a pilot, there's a balance between, do you want to put in systems and spend money, resources, when, maybe you're not sure that something's going to really fully develop, maybe we had no idea that this was going to, turn out as it did. And so, the question was, do we want to take the time and money to put a, billing system in place that can automatically do this? I think that was the concern that was raised, and that's where the 350, limit played into it. Was, okay, looking at this, knowing how we could bill, we could handle 350 with the resources we have, or maybe even some additional resources, but giving us time to get those in place. Again, as we were seeing that this has become, more successful than we expected, we have made the decision to put, to upgrade our billing system to handle this on an automated basis. But again, it's more just a timing issue. We have learned that this is successful, but it's really just a matter of timing. By the time we realized it, we still had to get lead time in to do the programming to, get all the specifications done. So it's, again, not that we're opposed to more than 350. It's more just kind of the timing of when that happens.
Okay, but you believe that you'll have it done mid-year
Yeah.
in 2019. So
Yeah.
even if there are some of these projects, they were just talking about a few months that we would have this issue then, this
Yeah.
timing issue.
That's our
Okay,
hope.
all right, thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chason, I know you kind of snuck to the back there. I had a couple of questions about just to kind of talk numbers to get an understanding of what kind of impact we're looking at.
Sure.
In order for the company to be at 100% at 4.5 kilowatt hours, what type of additional subscriber numbers are we talking about here?
So probably the best thing to refer to is the appendix to our application,
Okay.
where you'll see the list of the subscriber organizations that are covered by this request. It also shows you the sizing and then the estimated number of subscribers. I'm hunting a little bit because of my math challenges, but I think this will give you a sense for, based on the size of the project, how many subscribers we project needing.
So for these numbers in Appendix A, are these in addition to 350, or is the 350 that's currently in the regulation part of this? Just using an example for ESA Sparks Glencoe, estimated number of subscribers to allocate according to your Appendix A is 370. So does that mean we need an extra 20, or are we needing an extra 370?
In that instance, using your example, we need 20 extra subscribers. So these numbers include the 350. These are total subscribers per project.
Okay, so assuming 100% for each of these, about 12 projects or so, I did not do the math for all of these, and it's to everyone's benefit. We're looking at, I guess, about a couple thousand overall.
As they say, subject to check.
Subject to
I agree
check.
with you.
Okay. All right. Ms. Sikora? In October, the Commission did approve an additional number of customers to allow for an additional number of subscribers for sign-up. It was initial 300 for Forefront. Do you know if there's been any impact so far for the company in terms of those additional subscribers? What type of steps did the company take to prepare for that?
If I'm not mistaken, those have not come online yet. So
Okay.
we really, we're looking again to see when they're coming on. A lot of these, are very much in flux because of issues with delays and that. So, we're kind of monitoring to see when we expect them to come online and trying to plan accordingly. But it's been somewhat difficult just because the timing has been so all over the place.
Okay. So that was an additional 300 on top of the 350 that's in regulation. So what did the company consider in order to determine that that was an acceptable increase in subscribers, that could be handled? According to the staff buck sheet from October, both BGE and the PHI companies agreed that the 300 number was acceptable.
I wasn't involved with that, but I suspect we, looked at the timing of when it was going to come on and what additional resources or what resources we had and what we thought it would take. And, the fact that, this wasn't a long-term issue, it was the timing of when we thought it would come on versus when the billing system would go up and running. But, other than that, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Ms. Garofalo, since staff wrote that portion of the buck sheet, are you familiar with what the companies were looking at to determine an additional 300 was a comfortable increase or something they could handle?
Well, I think the number of customers was 1,200 to 2,000. But I don't know. I talked to each company, and Potomac Edison said we're not going to develop one. PHI said that their companies could handle that, and BGE said that yes, they could do that. And so I think everyone is aware that this is a little bit of a mismatch, but as a legal issue, there are pluses and minuses, and one of the minuses is that while you're granting a waiver, you also are you will be faced with the grant of waiver from everybody who's out there, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, is there a representative of First Energy or Potomac Edison in the audience today? Seeing none. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Mr. Seegers, if he would come up representing the PHI companies.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matt Seegers, appear for the PHI companies.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Seegers, thanks for indulging me on a question. So the Appendix A to the applicant's submittal shows a need for 150 additional customers for Delmarva and 150 additional subscribers, for Pepco, if I'm reading this thing correctly. Staff indicated in their buck sheet that the PHI companies could accommodate 100 additional subscribers. Was that 100 for the PHI companies in total, or was it 100 for Delmarva and 100 for Pepco?
Unfortunately, I do not have staff's buck sheet in front of me, Commissioner, and I know that staff did converse with our subject matter experts, who unfortunately are not here with me today. I believe that would be an additional. I think that would be an additional 100 per project. I don't think that would be an additional that would be a complete number for all these projects. The thing about the PHI companies, especially for Pepco, is that we have a community solar project in DC, and there is no subscriber cap limit, which is why the PHI companies, I think, are more able to accommodate a threshold above that 350.
Okay, so thank you. That's illuminating for me. So take the Chester Woods Point Solar LLC project that's in Delmarva's territory, and they need an additional 150. So what happens when you go above that 100 that the PHI companies say they could accommodate per project?
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer for that, Commissioner. That's something I could certainly get back to. I know that for now it is a manual process, and for the PHI companies, we only have one community solar project that is online right now. We know that there are several more that are in the pipeline. We know that a number of developers have gotten the extensions from when they need to be online. So. I know that one of our hopes is that we will have our automated billing system up and running in time for when we really start getting these projects online. But for now, it's still a manual process, Your Honor. I hope that answers your question.
And as much as the applicant's submittal exceeds what you say you can handle per project now, at least in 2 instances for PHI, would your position be that we shouldn't grant this waiver because it would go above what you say you could handle as a company per project right now? Do you have a position?
I know that when developers have come to the PHI companies and discussed with us whether or not we would object to a waiver of the 350, we have told them that we would not do so. We have also made it clear to them that the developer is going to have to show good cause for why 350 should not be the hard limit. We will not necessarily oppose it, but you as the commission have to make a determination in terms of is there really a good reason why there has to be more than 350 subscribers for each of these projects.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Seegers. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Kind of,
I hope I answered your question.
well, you did fine. I appreciate it, and I know you didn't expect to speak this morning, so thank you very much. I want to come back to staff, though. Just very quickly, for Mr. Vanderhayden, you kicked around the number 100. PHI companies kicked around the number 100. Is there any magic to that number? You're just using it for a discussion point.
I think the number has to do with the capacity. The maximum capacity of one of these facilities is 2 megawatts. When the 350 number was developed, I think with the idea that you'd have roughly 6 or 7 kilowatts per customer, and that I think was targeted at hitting most of an average customer's load. At 450, I think we're taking the size of that down to roughly a little over 5 kilowatts, which is going to probably give you about 500 kilowatt hours a month, perhaps. And so the extra is because I think the utilities or the subscriber organizations are realizing that folks are not signing up for the full load, or they're not able to sign up the larger customers that they had thought they would. So they're turning exclusively to trying to market to residential customers because perhaps they're more the rates they can get from them are higher because they are facing higher electricity rates or something of that nature. So the additional 100, I think, is coming just from shrinking down from 7 kilowatts or so down to maybe 5 in terms of the average subscription size.
Okay. Some of these go significantly more than 100 in terms of subscribers, some of these projects. So I'm just trying to figure out the magic of these numbers. Okay, Ms. Garofalo, I have a question for you. As a follow-up to Commissioner Richards, who asked about what the legislature said and what it didn't say, legislature also passed the Administrative Procedures Act, did it not?
I believe it did.
and the general expectation of the Administrative Procedures Act is not that we kind of use a waiver process to eviscerate provisions specifically entered into a COMAR without going through the vetting of the rulemaking process, which is very cumbersome. It's a very long process. This number was arrived at through a rulemaking process, this 350 number. All the stakeholders were heard and argued that, and waivers should be rare. They shouldn't be the rule. If this state-operated COMAR, where waivers were the rule, COMAR wouldn't mean anything. And the Administrative Procedures Act wouldn't mean anything either. Is that not right?
Yes, I agree with that.
So doesn't the legislature have some expectation that its agencies, whether they're independent agencies or executive branch agencies, put good faith into having some fidelity to the Code of Maryland regulations? Do you agree with that?
Well, I can't speak for the General Assembly, but I think that staff puts a lot of effort into regulations. They try and have a robust stakeholder process where everyone has their
And if we're going to change this particular COMAR in this instance by eviscerating the 350 cap, we probably should give it the due diligence of the rulemaking process and change the regulation appropriately, not just cut it out through a waiver. Is that generally... I mean, that's how I see it. I don't know if staff sees it that way, too.
I would agree that this would effectively change the what's in the COMAR as to size, and therefore that would be an option open to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any additional questions?
I actually have one more question for Mr. Chasen. Regarding the challenges that your organizations would have if they're unable to increase the limit. What's been the impact for enrollments that you've seen thus far for LMI, low and moderate income customers? Have you seen that there's been some challenges in increasing, including them?
I think actually what we've seen is that it has gone better than expected, and that's why I think you see that there are 4 projects on that list that involve LMI specifically. I think that's part of the surprise, and what you'll see in our application is that part of what that contributes then is lower usage. Many of those customers are subscribing at lower amounts. And part of what will happen if this is denied is that we'll have to change our subscription strategy. For the projects that do go forward despite that, they'll have to change who they're marketing to, and that's going to make, that's going to have an effect on customers, particularly LMI.
Okay. Thank you.
Obviously, this is a difficult case. 350 is not a magic number. It was derived through a stakeholder process. That benefit of the bargain was struck. At the same time, we do want these pilots to be successful, and Mr. Chasen, as you said, it's possibly a good problem to have more pieces. I weigh that against the fact that we have regulations that are particularly crystal clear with respect to utilities that do not have automated processes in place, and it sounds like Potomac Edison will never have an automated process in place, and I'm not sure of the reason for that, and it would have been good if they were here in attendance today. However, staff's argument that we would effectively be gutting the regulation if we approved the 12 projects here sits heavily for me. And the fact that the utilities may be in a position to automate their billing in the near term, Q2 of next year, leaves me with some hope that your projects that you represent will be able to subscribe those LMI and brownfield customers, hopefully in the near term. But viewing all of this evidence, I would deny the waiver. I do appreciate PHI's request to offer an additional 100 subscribers to one project in the PEPCO territory and one project in the Delmarva territory. So if PHI is amenable, I would ask that those 2 projects be lifted to a cap of 450. That is my position. Commissioner Richard.
Well, I disagree. I think we've already lifted it once. I think as a pilot program, there's a lot we have to learn. And the legislature, I did give us some very clear direction. In other cases, we just pulled numbers out of the air, in this case, the 350 number. And so I believe they've also expect us to put together regulations, and they also expect us to support a program to its success. And if in fact we're doing something now that can help us achieve that success, I think it's important we be flexible, and we ought to consider these projects that have already begun. They've already started their solicitations. And so I would be very much in favor of granting the waiver. Let's see these projects through fruition, and then we have some information we can report back to the legislature. And at that time, we would probably have time to relook at we actually would need to look at the regulations and make sure that they accommodate a successful consumer or solar program. So that I would be on the side of approving, and I would oppose the proposed motion from staff.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I obviously thought there were very valid arguments on both sides of this issue, and when I came into the hearing room this morning, hadn't fully made up my mind on where I thought those arguments were. I truly wanted to hear it re-argued, and I think we've had a good re-argument of these issues, and I appreciate all parties contributing to that discussion. So on one hand, we want these projects to be successful. It's why we created this process and this pilot program, and I certainly do. On the other hand, some fidelity to process, and being a 22-year legislator in a previous life is important to me, and I place a premium on process and not taking Comar liberties to eviscerate hard-fought, negotiated limitations out of the regs without a fair rulemaking process for all parties, including parties who are not here today and who are not represented. A rulemaking process would elicit that kind of participation from other investor-owned utilities and other interested parties, which we don't have in an AM typically. It doesn't have the robustness of a rulemaking process. So for that reason, being a closely divided question in my mind, I would support denying this application with the hopes that cooperation continue between the developers and the utilities should we reach limitations that are currently in regulations, and my position prevails, of course, but that the cooperation continue, and that if we do reach a point of diminishing ability to subscribe or recruit subscribers, that this issue be open for being revisited, because we've actually bumped up against a limitation. In my mind, we haven't bumped up against it yet. It's nebulous. Sometime in the future we might. So that's my position. I would deny the waiver request.
Thank you. Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a unique situation where we're in the middle of learning a lot of new information about a pilot, which is actually what we wanted to know. It's the kind of information we'd hoped to gather. And now we're in the midst of what I used to refer to when I was helping to draft regulations years ago as sausage making. You know, we're in the middle of all of the back and forth of trying to figure out if this is the right number or if there's a different number. So I appreciate that the companies, 3 of the 4 participating in this program, have started the process of creating new billing systems that can handle these functions. I think that that's going to be an expense that we're going to have to pay for at some point in the future. But for now, at least, it's a good way to help address a challenge that we know now is really a good challenge. And we have a number of customers that are interested in this program. Looking forward, I would have voted in favor of waiving this regulation and allowing for an increase beyond the 350. I would have limited that similarly to the way we did with Forefront, maybe not at a 300 number, but at something smaller. And that way we would not overly burden the utility companies who are working through this manually until their systems are in place. But at the same time, we would have had some flexibility going forward to make sure that we're not discouraging customers who would be interested in participating from doing so. I think that at some point in the future we are going to have to look at this number again, especially once the billing systems are in place, probably sometime during the course of the next year. So in a sense we're just moving this along a little bit for now, and we're going to have to come back to look at it. So my hope is that that's the direction we'll take in the future.
Thank you. Commissioner Herman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would deny the waiver. I think that in some and hopefully many cases, this will be, the waiver is really a matter of timing, and that I would urge the companies to rely on the CSEG companies to rely on our utilities' assertions that they will be finished by the end of the second quarter. And I think, in my mind, they should be able to rely on that, so that if the project is planning to go into effect or into service starting in July, then a waiver is no longer necessary, because they will be able to. The regulation doesn't require a waiver if the company has an automated system. So 3 out of our 4 companies will. This regulation, won't really need to apply to them, because they will already have automated companies, and therefore, and I want to note that I think, at least for my part, I thank the companies for doing that, and I urge them to do it as quickly as they can. If they can get it done before the end of June, that would be great, and that would facilitate this. And I also would urge the CSEGs in Potomac Edison service territory to talk with that company and potentially come back with another waiver request, and see where we can go, when with respect to Potomac Edison and have this discussion again, potentially, with Potomac Edison. But at this time, I would deny the waiver. And I would also note that with respect to BGE, the way I count, it's close to 1,500 customers. That's a lot of extra manual billing. So I think that potentially could be problematic, and part of my concern is that customers won't get billed, and I think that is not a way to start a pilot program, to have customers not being billed or being billed improperly because there are insufficient resources. So that raises significant concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Herman. And again, I do note that the PHI companies for those two projects have committed, I won't make that a part of today's record, but they have committed to increasing the subscribers cap to 450 for those two projects in those two service territories. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission deny the requested waiver of COMAR 20.62.02.03A, pending implementation by the affected electric company's development of an automated billing function for the pilot.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I would amend that motion to include the increase of 100 subscribers for PHI.
As noted.
As they have already agreed that they can accommodate the 100.
So before I agree to that amendment, I have to understand something. That effectively is waivering the 350 cap currently in COMAR. Is it not?
It is, although I understand that the company has agreed to that.
I understand they've agreed to it, but it's a partial granting of the waiver, which means I better rethink the wording of this thing if that's where the majority of people are. I can't just offer this up and tackle a 100-person waiver.
Understood. Why don't we do that then, to grant the waiver with respect to those two projects? And I can make the motion if you prefer.
Well, I'm not good at composing words on the fly, Mr. Chairman, to keep it in accordance with the legal beagle, so I'll let a lawyer give it to you.
Thank you. I would make a motion to, with the exception of the Chester Wood Point Solar Project in Delmarva Service Territory and the Clean Choice Energy Community Project in the PEPCO Service Territory, where the Commission will grant waiver of COMAR 20.62.2.3A to allow an increase in the cap by an additional 100 customers. Whereas the Commission would deny the requested waiver for the remainder of the 10 projects pending implementation by the affected electric company's development of an automated billing function for the pilot.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay, but
Opposed.
if I
But
oh,
it's,
I'm sorry.
well, I like half of the motion.
Yeah, I wanted to say the same thing. It was kind of, I wish we could have done it in separate motions, perhaps. Because I'm definitely in favor
So
of the.
I'm in favor in part and denying.
Exactly.
Madam Secretary, was that motion appropriate, or should I break it down into two?
I thought you did, or at least that's what I had, but we can do it too if you want.
Okay.
You can deny the requested waiver of, and then this lists the 10 entities and the utilities, and then
Okay.
second for the two.
Let me do that. So we'll strike that motion. I think the parties here know what we're doing, but just to be clear, first motion is to grant the requested waiver of COMAR 20.62.2.3A for the Chester Woods Point Solar Project located in the Delmarva Power Service Territory and the Clean Choice Energy Community Project in the PEPCO Service Territory, whereas the PHI companies committed to staff that they would be amenable to increasing the number of subscribers by 100 to a total of 450 customers in each of those 2 service territories, pending implementation by the affected electric company's development of an automated billing function for the pilot. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. With respect to the remaining 10 subscriber organizations, the motion is to deny the requested waiver of COMAR 20.62.2.3A, pending implementation by the affected electric company's development of an automated billing function for the pilot. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
The motion to deny is approved. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
The next item on the agenda is item 8, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, filed on October 31, 2018, Supplement 621 to PSC MD E-6. The company proposes to implement the rates for the residential time of use pilot program.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Benjamin Baker on behalf of staff. BGE has filed a distribution tariff to implement time of use rates for the PC44 rate design pilot starting April 1st of 2019. The Commission has previously accepted BGE's rates in a previous letter order, but the utility has updated the rate since. BGE's change is insignificant and slightly lowers the on-peak rate to better reflect cost recovery. Also, there were differences in the customer availability compared to the PHI tariffs, as noted by OPC in their filing. Staff, OPC, and the joint utilities met Tuesday to determine if compromise could be reached. 4 items were discussed and 3 were agreed to, and 1 item was outstanding. BG will drop tariff language that restricts access to customers who plan on moving within 2 years. The PHI companies will add language that limits net energy metering customers on the time of use pilot to 10% of the pilot participants. All utilities will have language in their tariffs that state a customer may sign up for the tariff until April 1st of 2021, and the tariffs will be in effect until April 1st of 2022. All utilities have asked the Commission for guidance in regards to whether customers with medical certificates should or should not be allowed on the pilot time of use rates. OPC has presented arguments that request the Commission not allow customers with medical certificates on the rates. The advantage of allowing customers with medical certificates on the rates is that there may be savings that customers could realize. But the disadvantage of allowing these customers on these rates is that medical certificate customers may have a limited ability to shift their load due to their medical needs, and they may have an inability to pay volatile bills. The pilot's results will not be affected by the inclusion or the exclusion of these customers, since Brattle will exclude these customers from the data. Staff recommends the Commission restrict customers with medical certificates from participation in the pilot, since the cost risks to these customers may not outweigh the benefits. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission accept BG's proposed tariffs with modifications presented by staff and direct BG to file clean copies of the tariff pages with an effective date of April 1st of 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. People's Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Good morning. As an initial matter, we thank staff for convening the meeting on Tuesday to discuss some of our concerns, and as staff properly noted, there was one issue that we could not find a consensus on, specifically whether customers who have medical certifications on file should be allowed to sign up for the TOU rate. And we would submit that this impacts a small number of customers, but specifically those customers with very severe circumstances. And in our experiences, customers usually apply and submit a certification to the company when they're in a position that they cannot pay their bill or are already behind on their bill. And it seems that these customers may not be the ones that are able to shift their load, and as staff noted, may not also be able to incur any unforeseen increases in their bills that a TOU rate may cause. It's also our understanding that there's a very small number of these types of customers for both PHI and BGE, and so certainly it would not impact pilot participation. And after we obtain the results from the TOU pilot, we will be in a better position to fully understand any possible impacts on these types of customers. So we would urge the Commission to accept the restriction for customers with certifications on file and restrict them from being able to sign up for the proposed TOU rates. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Raker. Does Counsel for BG&E have anything to add?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'd just say that, BG, honestly, we were kind of torn on this one with the medical certificates. On the one hand, we definitely did understand the concern that, these customers, may not be in the position to handle large increases. But at the same time, these might be customers that could very well benefit if, there are certain customers that just by the nature of their usage already could, just by going on the TOU rates without having to do anything, could end up with lower bills. So, they will be excluded from the pilot, the EM&V part for reasons that I can't explain because it's EM&V things. But, but again, if the customers, it will help them, should we prohibit them from being on the pilot? So we are very torn.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Richard.
Just one question on that. The PHI companies and BG, you submitted I guess a plan together. Is that correct? I'm just trying to understand why, on this particular issue, PHI's, I guess, tariffs are different than BG's. I guess you sort of answered it, but I'm a little confused how you just suddenly diverged on that one particular issue.
I think there was a misunderstanding, at least I think I was misunderstanding when the Brattle group said that, that we would be excluding this group of customers from the EM&V analysis, if that meant, they really had to be excluded from the pilot overall. I think that's one way you could do is say, hey, if they can't be in the pilot, if they can't be in the pilot analytics, why bother? But, I think BGE's thought was, well, there are going to be other customers who aren't in the pilot analytics but are still going to be able to participate. So do you automatically exclude them from the pilot just for that reason?
Okay. And so within BG, did you discuss, on one hand, you're correct, there could be significant savings, but on the other, if a customer doesn't take active control over their usage, there could be even greater increases. I mean, it's just the way the rates are set up right now. It's only a couple cent different between the peak rate or the regular rate, and then the peak rate is significantly greater. So, I mean, was there discussion there about how, that it could impact these customers, and was there a discussion about specific information or education to be granted to this class of customer?
I think actually, I think that'll, for us, the belief is that we'll get taken care of what we're planning for everyone, because at least for all customers, the plan is to tell them, hey, looking at your current usage, here's what would happen to your bill. And so that some customers will be able to see that if I don't do anything, I'm going to be able to save. I can say for myself, if I switch in the pilot, which I don't think I can, but, I'm going to save by doing nothing, just by my current, how I use currently. So if you're a customer who's in that boat, you know that you don't have to do anything, and you're still going to save money just because of your current usage patterns. So I think that's something that all customers will see, that, hey, I don't have to do anything to save money. I can stick with my current usage pattern, and I'll be good. There are other customers, though, that may be on the cusp, and they'll have to do a few things to save money. But there's other customers that I think, looking at their current usage, they'll see, hey, no, if I don't change, I'm going to have to pay a lot more, and therefore I shouldn't sign up for this.
Okay, and that level of detailed information is going to be provided every single customer that you're soliciting?
Yeah, that's kind of the basic message that we're going to be,
Not basic message, but this analysis of each customer's current
yeah,
usage.
everybody is going to have an analysis of their current usage, and we haven't quite designed it yet, but it's going to show them, hey, based on your usage over the last 12 months, here's what that would mean if you switch to these rates. And then there'll be verbiage saying, you don't have to do anything and you'll save money, or, if you, still want to be on this rate and you can do things to change your usage, you possibly can still save.
Okay. Well, good. Great. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I think Mr. Raker may want to add something
Oh,
to
go
that.
ahead.
Oh,
Just one clarification. It's my understanding, and BG can clarify this, that these customers would not be included in the marketing sample for the pilot, meaning that they would not receive the initial marketing material that would indeed outline all of these various details that BGE was just talking about. So these may be customers that decide to sign up for the pilot, but may not indeed have that initial marketing information.
You're correct, but they would still have that information available, and I think that we would make sure that, and I'm speaking out of hand, but I would think that if customers are calling up, that information would be available, and we'd make it available to them. Honestly, I think.
Do you think or no? I mean, I think this is a very important point. So, is this in the tariff or not? That you're going to provide this level of detail to these.
No, the tariff does not
customers with
get
medical
this
needs.
level of detail. No, it's. And again, if given these concerns, the company, is willing to exclude them if that's a concern. Like I said, we were not. We kind of were on both sides of the fence. We saw, possible positives and possible negatives. So, we would not object if the commission determined that we should exclude these people as PHI is doing.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Raker, I have a couple questions for you, and Ms. Sikora, if you could hang out, I'm going to ask you to follow up on these.
Yes, sir.
OPC recommends two other things besides the medical certification issue. One, that the commission direct the company to remove the requirement that a customer must plan to reside in his home for a period of 2 years. Do you still advocate that?
We do, Commissioner. All of our other recommendations, and I think there were just a couple, the company agreed to amend as
Okay,
as
so
staff
they're agreed to. So there are going to be amended tariffs? They're already amended in what we have? What?
No, we're going to be ready, but given that the medical cert issue was up in the air, we'll get them filed later today or tomorrow once we get a decision.
Okay. And then the specification that the proposed time of use rates will still be available for enrolled customers as a kind of transition period, that'll be specified as well? Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a general question regarding, I wanted to make sure I understood the rationale for excluding medical certification customers from EMT. Could staff help me with that?
Excluding from the pilot results themselves.
Yes.
I do not have information why that was excluded. Bev, do you know?
No, I don't. No.
No.
I know there was concerns about, who would be in the pilot. Like, I think we're excluding budget billing customers from the pilot. And I think the concern was that because of their particular usage pattern, it could skew the results because maybe they don't have as much flexibility. People who are much smarter than I am about statistics and stuff like that made that call.
Thank you for that. I think that's an important point here because, as we know, our MedCert customers are only able to maintain the certification for 30 days. I mean, and quite frankly, at any time, any customer could find themselves in need of having one, even customers who've been marketed to and are actually participating in the pilot. So 6 months from now or 6 months after participating, they could need a MedCert. So I think it's worth looking into to find out what's the rationale for that, for excluding MedCert customers. They'll have the same challenges in managing their service as any other customer would, for better or worse. So,
I can definitely
Okay.
ask Brattle what the logic was. They probably have mentioned it, and I didn't retain it. So.
all right, thank you.
Commissioner Herman.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Raker, are Sorry. I understand the rationale, but at the same time, there we go. Sorry. At the same time, I think that people, customers with medical certifications have the right to make choices, and if this is a choice that they want to make, they should have the ability to do that. And so by doing this, aren't you taking away the possibility that somebody could save, or that somebody chooses to try to save on this tariff? Aren't you taking that away from them?
So we certainly consider that, and it was a hefty balance there. But in our view, as staff noted, we think the possibility of these customers facing harm in the inability to shift their load or the increase of their utility bills outweighs the possible benefit of some customers being able to actually benefit from the rate. So we certainly took that into consideration and didn't make our recommendation lightly. But again, as I noted, we think that the risk outweighs the benefit in this particular circumstance.
Right, and I guess in my view, I feel that this is a customer choice state. Customers are entitled to make their choices. It may not end up being a positive choice for that customer, and then they can try to move to a different, move back or do what it is they need to do. But I think that I'm troubled moving customers' choices and allowing them to make the choices they think are appropriate for them, given the amount of information that they're going to have available on the impact of this rate. So I understand what you're trying to do, but it does cause me trouble to sit in the place of their judgment and take away their ability to participate in the pilot. Thank you.
Thank you. On that point regarding medical certificates, I understand Commissioner Herman's argument, but I also understand that Office of People's Counsel has had experience with some of these folks, likely those with medical certification. And whether this carries any weight, but the fact that these medical certificate ratepayers would not largely constitute a significant amount of customers in the pilot project, I would be comfortable with excluding them, weighing the cost savings versus potential negative effects to life, health, or safety. So for that reason, I would support OPC's request. Any additional questions for the parties today?
Just again, to be clear what I've just heard, so would medically certified customers get all the materials necessary to make that evaluation? Is that where we ended up, that would be something that the company would provide?
I'm not sure, because they would not, you're correct that Mr. Riker was correct that they wouldn't be in the marketing wave. We could make it so that if they call it Inquire, we could send the materials to them. We'd have to, we could make it happen. If thinking about it now, that's something that definitely should be part of the process. They wouldn't get it initially. If they found out about the pilot, it'd be more kind of happenstance because they saw it on the website or they heard about it from someone else because they aren't going to be marketed to. But if someone called up, we could make sure the process was that before they were allowed to sign up, they received the same information that everybody else got.
Okay, but it's still kind of, is that a yes or no? Sorry. You're going to provide the information?
Yes, we would.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I would then definitely agree with the choice argument. And as long as they did in fact get all the same information as every other potential customer out there, my concern would be is if they were somehow excluded from having that information.
We can make that happen, and we will.
Okay. Great. Thank you,
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. If I missed this, I apologize, but this discussion elicited a thought in my mind. And Mr. Raker, I'm going to ask you to say again what you stated about EM&V with regard to this subclass of customers in this pilot.
I'm not sure if I made that statement or the company, but our understanding is that these customers will not be included in the pilots in the sample for the pilot. And
In terms of savings, the time of use,
in terms of the initial, so there will be a certain number of customers to which the company will market the TOU rate based on Brattle's sampling. Those customers then will be the ones that are included in the EM&V analysis. And since these customers will be excluded from the initial sampling, they will therefore not then be included in the EM&V analysis.
and why are they excluded from the initial sampling?
So that is something I'm not 100% clear on, and it sounded like...
And that's something I needed to check with Brattle about. I suspect it has to do with a concern that their usage pattern is such that it would skew the results, or not so much their usage pattern, but the possibility of their inability to switch because of their medical needs might skew the results, but I'm not sure.
So although I agree with Commissioner Herman's assessment of choice with regard to that and our sensitivity to not limiting that, if they're not positive contributors to this pilot because they're excluded from the measurement of the pilot process, then I don't think they should be in there, and I'm not going to support putting them in the pilot, and I'm going to support OPC's position to exclude them from the pilot.
Okay, so I've heard two commissioners in support of exclusion, two opposed. Commissioner Linton, where are you?
Oh, I'm in favor of allowing them to participate in the pilot.
Okay, thank you.
I think that the medical certification program is not an annual program, it's a monthly program. In many cases, the medical certification is not for the customer of record, it's for a person that could be living in the house, so it could be a 5-year-old or a person who's a senior citizen, a great-grandparent or something, while the customer of record has the ability to manage the usage and shifting of load and everything else that's happening there. So I think it's those customers have to make a number of other choices already regarding their medical needs and the various challenges they have to go through already. And so I think this is something they're accustomed to doing, and I'd prefer that they receive the information and allow them to make their own choice.
Thank you. It appears that a majority of the commissioners support inclusion of the customers with medical certifications into the TOU program. Commissioner Richard?
Can I just ask one more question? I wanted to find out from staff if any of them had participated in the work group, and specifically had a chance to review the November 21st letter / report, whatever we're calling that.
Yes, staff has been in the work group, and we have actually submitted work group comments. Our buck sheet should be filed or about to be filed on those comments.
Okay. I just wanted, at this point, is there any reason you would, any issue in that report that would cause you to I guess, recommend that we hold off on approving tariffs? And I noted that there were still budget issues that were not set, issues around AMI and whether or not there would be real-time information provided to participants, and also even reporting requirements, annual versus semi-annual, that type of thing. So is there anything that would cause you to recommend that we hold off today on approving these tariffs?
All right. So my understanding from my review of the report is that we have not. Nothing in the report, to my knowledge, is dealing with which customers can and can't participate. And to my knowledge, nothing in that report is dealing with the with the tariff rates themselves. So you could decide on the issue today, unless you were in a position where you think that how you decide next week would, I guess, effectively not allow the pilots to go forward. So if you think that, so I guess that would be the reason to delay by 1 week, is if you wanted to handle the whole matter together in that situation. In terms of what's going to be, or what is in that report, deals, yes, with the budgets, and it deals with inclusion of other tools that might be available to customers, and so it's really next week is really the budgets. There's a lot of that report.
Okay.
Your Honor, can I just weigh in on that? The only issue I see is that the tariff sheets that are up for review today do say, or do have an implementation date or effective date of April 1st. Staff in their staff is, I believe, recommending or suggesting a potential delay to the program to address some of the issues in the report. So, if next week you agreed with staff and the program got delayed again, we would have to file revised tariff sheets to change the date for when they were effective.
Okay, so what you're saying is if there were if anything came out of our next administrative meeting, they could be reflected in the pilot project. There could be revisions made to the tariffs, and it could be reflected in the pilot project.
Yes, and the date, like I said, would have to change if it was a delay, if there was any delay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the commissioners have decided the outstanding issue with respect to medical certification customers. Madam Secretary, if I may inquire, we don't have the revised tariff sheets which the parties agreed to via settlement on Tuesday before us. How do we proceed with this motion?
You can go ahead and accept the tariffs subject to the modifications that were made by staff during the meeting today, and then require that Baltimore Gas file clean copies of those tariffs with the modifications.
Thank you very much. With that guidance, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move we accept the tariff pages for filing as modified by the Commission staff and direct the company to file clean copies with an effective date of April 1st, 2019.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it for the purposes of further discussion, just to say I'm going to support this motion in general, but I still have a problem with including the medical needs certification in part of the population that we're approving today. So on whole, I'll approve the motion, but I still object to that piece of it.
Your objection is noted. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
The next item is Potomac Electric Power Company, Delmarva Power and Light Company, filed on October 31st, 2018, revised tariff pages. The companies proposed to implement the rates for the residential time of use pilot program.
Chairman, Commissioners, Benjamin Baker again on behalf of staff. Pepco and Delmarva and Power, together the PHI companies, have filed distribution tariffs to implement the time of use rates for the PC44 rate design pilots starting April 1st of 2019. The Commission has previously accepted rates in a letter order for the distribution time of use rates. The PHI companies have material changes to their rates due to updates in the billing determinants and updates to distribution cost. Staff has reviewed the proposed rates and has determined that cost recovery will be ensured and that the rates follow the same, all use the same methodology for development. There are differences in customer availability in the PHI company's tariffs compared to BGE's tariffs, as previously discussed, and staff, OPC, and the joint utilities reach compromise on 3 of the issues. BG will drop tariff language that restricts access to customers who plan on moving within 2 years. The PHI companies will add language that limits net energy metering on the time of use pilots to 10% of pilot participants. And all utilities will have language in their tariffs that state a customer may sign up for the tariff until April 1st of 2021, and the tariff will be in effect until April 1st of 2022. I also note that the PHI companies have language in their tariffs excluding customers with medical certificates from participation in the pilot, an issue that we just discussed on the BG tariff. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission accept the proposed tariffs with modifications presented and direct the companies to file clean copies of the tariff pages with an effective date of April 1st of 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. To be clear, there's no outstanding issues amongst the parties?
The only outstanding issue would be what we just discussed with BG, which was in regards to the medical certificates.
Thank you. Mr. Raker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, Mikhail Raker for the Office of People's Counsel. As staff noted, we did have a conference call on Tuesday to discuss our concerns. As staff also noted, the company agreed to the 2 minor tweaks that we noted in our letter. So at this time, we don't have any additional suggestions, but would support staff's proposal to direct the companies to refile amended tariffs in accordance with those recommendations. Of course, we do have the medical certification issue that we just discussed, and as staff noted, PHI did have that particular provision included in their proposed tariffs.
Thank you. Does counsel for PHI have anything to add?
We have nothing to add, Your Honor. We're just here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions? Seeing no questions, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission accept the revised tariff pages as modified by commission staff for filing and direct the company to file clean copies of the tariff revisions with an effective date of April 1st, 2019.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Item number 10 is a Potomac Electric Power Company filed on November 2nd, 2018, revised tariff pages. The company proposes changes to the general terms and conditions for furnishing electric service in Maryland.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is a tariff filing by the Potomac Electric Power Company, filing revised pages for its general terms and conditions tariff. Specifically, the company is making a change in order to conform its tariff to the language in COMAR 20.31.02.03A1, with the original effective date in the filing was December 2nd. The change, in fact, is a very small one, basically changing a will to a may, and that, again, matches the COMAR language. After discussion with staff, we realized that the individual change had a bit of an unintended consequence with the language, and with further discussions, we agreed on some additional language, and the company submitted that. And with that change, staff recommends that the Commission accept the revised general terms and condition tariff pages and direct the company to file a clean copy of the tariff with an effective date of December 6th, 2018.
Thank you. Does counsel have anything to add?
Nothing to add, Your Honor. Just here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions? Seeing none, is there a motion? Commissioner Herman.
I'm confused. I just want to make sure I have the right pages here. What I have is two changes of little may. Is that what I'm supposed to have? Something else?
There was the initial tariff filing on November 2nd, and the revised or corrected tariff filing on November 26th. And that contained the additional correction.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a motion?
Yes, Mike, sure. Back to me. Item number 10. I move we accept the revised tariff pages for filing and direct the company to file clean copies of the tariff revisions with an effective date of December 5, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The motion is approved.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Thank you.
would it be December 6th since today's meeting is the 6th? I think when the motion was put together, it was because of
Does
the...
that mean to redo the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. For item number 10, I move we accept the revised tariff pages for filing and direct the company to file clean copies of the tariff revisions with an effective date of December 6th, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? The motion is approved.
Thank you, Commissioners.
The last item on the agenda, item 11, is Cypress Creek Renewables, LLC, filed on November 1st, 2018, request for an extension of operation deadline.
This is a request for an extension of operation deadline under COMAR 20.620304C. By extending this deadline for 6 months after the 18-month operation deadline for completing a community solar energy generating system provided under that regulation, Cypress Creek would have 24 months in which to bring its project into full operation. Cypress Creek was accepted into the pilot on August 7th, 2018, making its 18-month deadline under COMAR February 7th, 2019. Cypress Creek cites various permitting delays which were beyond its control and have pushed construction into the winter months. The company now has all permits required to construct its system and requests an extension until August 7th, 2019. Staff recommends that the Commission, consistent with its previous rulings, extend applicant's operation deadline to June 1, 2019, thereby granting Cypress Creek a time-limited waiver of COMAR 20-620304C2 and extend the company's operation deadline by approximately 120 days.
Thank you. Counsel for the applicant.
Morning, Commissioners. Christopher Mudd with Venable here on behalf of the applicant. While we appreciate staff's recommendation for what I'll call a partial extension, I do have a bit of additional information that came to light since our request was made on November 1st. Staff's report indicates that the applicant has all permits in hand for construction. That's actually not accurate. At the time the request was made, Cypress Creek was hopeful that they would have all permits within 1 to 2 weeks, as indicated in the request. Since that time, they've been working with the county and in fact did not have electrical permits or building permits in hand. There was an ongoing issue with the fire department and fire marshal's office on this project related to the potential for installation or the request for installation of gravel throughout the entire site. They've been working back and forth with them and believe they've worked out a solution, but it requires a variance be submitted, which has not yet been processed by the county. So as we stand here today, a month and a couple days after this request was made, they still do not have all permits in hand. We would respectfully request and renew the request to extend through to August, as Cypress believes that the June 1st deadline, while recommended and appreciated, is still cutting it kind of close. And the last thing I would just mention is, as has been mentioned a couple times today, and I was before the Commission earlier this summer, this is a pilot program, and I think what we're learning as we're going through this, certainly learning things in the approval process, and now that we're into the permitting process and trying to figure out exactly what provisions and regulations apply or do not apply, we're still kind of feeling our way through that. And for what it's worth, Cypress does installations nationally. They've been working in dozens of jurisdictions, and this is the first time they've run into this particular issue. And I think their experience elsewhere is actually helping to form some of the decisions that are being made at the local jurisdictions here.
Mr. Mudd, do you have any indication of when the variance will be reviewed or approved?
I do not. I'm sorry, I do not. Just was reported to me this week that it has not yet been approved.
It's hard to say then whether or not the August deadline or June deadline would be sufficient if we don't know when the variance will be granted. That's the county or the fire department?
The county.
Okay. All right. Commissioners. Commissioner
Quick question.
O'Donnell.
So what happens in the wintertime with these construction crews that do your construction? You just lay them off? They quit working? What happens? Contract suspended? Put an animated suspension for the winter? What happens?
Well, I think in this particular case, what was suggested by Cypress is they anticipate they would get started, and if and when the ground were to freeze, they would put a hold on it until it thawed.
So what happens when the ground freezes? What can't you do when the ground freezes?
Excavate.
You can't excavate. So all excavation in the state of Maryland stops.
Well, I don't know
in the wintertime when the ground freezes.
I can't speak about the state of Maryland, but I'm just speaking of what
I think that excavation companies and trenching companies and people who lay cable would be appalled to know that we think that work stops in the wintertime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Mudd, it's hard to predict how long you'll need if you don't have the variance. Consistent with our recent practice, as mentioned by Ms. Garofalo, we will extend a waiver for an additional 4 months through June 1st of 2019. If you run into additional delays, I'm sure you'll be back here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant the company a time-limited waiver of COMAR 20.62.03.04C2, extending the applicant's operation deadline to June 1st, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? The motion is approved. Seeing no additional business before the commission today, this meeting is adjourned.